welcome back to Wrestling Roundtable Radio on blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable, simulcast on GoFightLive.tv. The number to call is 347-857-4647 to ask us questions and share your thoughts and opinions with the internet listening. If you're listening on YouTube, this is way after the fact and you want to listen to us live, 11 p.m. Tuesdays on Blog Talk Radio. This is Eric Santamaria, the host of Wrestling Roundtable, for this, our 41st show here on Blog Talk Radio, and we are coming up on another taping Saturday. We will be taping 2 new shows, the second of which will be our season finale for Season 4, so stay tuned for that. And Wrestling Roundtable has been updated, yes. There's lots of new content on WrestlingRoundtable.com for you. Don Fernandez has a review of the WWE Greatest Rivalries DVD set of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. That is out now. You can find out all about that on the website. Deron Browning has a guest column, the third part of the Researching Martial Arts series started by Jamal Reynolds. His takes a look at pancration, which, if you don't know what that is essentially the ancient equivalent of mixed martial arts, as started in ancient Greece. And that's a very interesting read. Check that out now on our site. Also added the latest radio shows, of course, which are also available on Blog Talk Radio and iTunes. If you go into iTunes, type in the Wrestling Roundtable, and all of our shows will be there. That's over 90 audio shows now for you to listen to, including Season 1, which is incomplete on YouTube. We just celebrated our 4th anniversary on YouTube recently, and re-upped the first show ever, complete in full for the first time in years. So that was an interesting look back to see where we've grown from there, and I know the fans appreciated it, and we appreciate you. That's why we want to hear from you. 347-857-4647. Also on the website, the latest show, show number 55, which takes a look back at The Rock's career and the best and worst Swerves. We'll be talking a little more about Swerves later on, but that show is complete now on the site. We will be getting all our latest shows updated on Go Fight Live this week. That's the latest radio shows and the latest video show. We've got a news update coming within the next couple days. That's pretty big. This is newsletter size, people. A lot of research and a lot of information, not just from pro wrestling, not just from mixed martial arts, and not just from America. This is all over the world, Mexico, Japan, wherever. You want to find out what's going on in the world of pro wrestling and mixed martial arts? Check out the news. And, of course, the exclusive match upload of the Lightning Kid. That is not Sean Waltman. This was another version performed by, well, he's Richie Paradise now in Florida, but back in his Lightning Kid days in late 98 as he took on Schmuck Dudley. Quite the name. And the match is exclusive from Wrestling Roundtable. And before we get to the rest of the panel, wanted to mention some names of some fans I've met at shows recently, and I've been forgetting to bring up on the air. I'm sorry about that. Always appreciate meeting fans, so I want to say hello to Tyler, Josh, Mike, and everyone else I've met recently, and look forward to seeing more of you soon, live and in person. On the panel tonight, Will Brooks will be joining us later, but up first, Rodney LeConte. Hey, yo, Rod.
Hey, yo, Eric, it's nice to be back in the air.
Yes, it is. Glad you're joining us. And what's going on with you, Rodney? What's the latest?
Just been training, just trying to nurse this injury, this neck injury that I had, which really has affected my training, work, and everything, where it's to the point where I could sit down and it's, I don't know if it's a nerve or what, where I feel like the pain goes all the way down to my triceps.
Sounds like a nerve.
Affecting the competition. I don't know what happened. It's something in training. I don't know. I just don't want anything to happen. And if it's like pulled or something, my neck pulled. I know a lot in jiu-jitsu, a lot of people are always getting the collar necktie on me. If I don't defend it properly or if they keep doing it in the wrong position, then I feel like pretty much paralyzed my shoulders up. That's been going on this busy season with work, videography stuff, and just living life, man.
Hope you feel physically better. We recently watched the Greatest Rivalries DVD, or actually it was Blu-ray. I'm not getting the fucking DVD. I want it in HD, and I want the extra content, right?
Exactly.
Don just reviewed it for our site, and it's really going to fuel a lot of our talk about the Montreal Screwjob because we'll be taping that on Saturday. But we didn't get to watch a lot of the extras because it was a late night. I watched some of it, and as I was explaining, it was a pretty comprehensive set. And if you want to get it, You can get it through our Amazon store. If you go to the shop portion of WrestlingRoundtable.com, if you want to get it for maybe a Christmas present or whatever winter solstice holiday you celebrate, you can get through the Amazon store. Anything on Amazon.com you can get through our store, and then we get a cut of it, which is the idea. Help support the show. You can get Pro Wrestling Respect DVDs. You can download Pro Wrestling Respect shows from Go Fight Live or GFL.tv. And you can get the Wrestling Roundtable T-shirt. All that's available at our website, so please help support the show. Share, rate, comment, and subscribe. Spread this around. Now that I'm done plugging, Rodney, what were your thoughts on the interview portion, the documentary?
I thought it was pretty accurate and very well put together, surprisingly. With these kind of things, you really don't know if WWE's going to spin it in a way that's going to kind of veer off the true story, try to rewrite history. They like to create that. But I think this is something that is so intriguing where almost for 14 years later, they released a DVD. I can't think of any storyline 14 years prior to 1997 where wrestling fans would be really excited about for a DVD to see. I think a lot of things that Brett said match what he said in his book, so it's good to see that there was a lot of truth to what was portrayed in the documentary, and I thought it was really good. If there was anything, I guess it was a new spin on things. Instead of having just talking heads with just Brett on one set and Sean on one set and showing the video footage, I really liked that interview part because you really got to see the emotion and the different stories, and having them in one room is, after all these years, is absurd enough. But even the minor disagreements that they had, everything just felt very genuine, very real. I was intrigued from beginning to end.
Pretty much every Brett and Sean match that you could really want is on this set, and as a great compliment to the very interesting and revealing and just great to watch interview segment, it was a really good set, so I recommend it. Let's get to the rest of the panel, though, because joining us tonight are the girls, one for pro wrestling and one for MMA. Up first, Coriander Ake in Chicago, our first radio panelist. Hey, Corey.
Hey, Eric. Hello, everyone.
And complimenting her from Baltimore, Maryland, Amira Rahim. Maybe
hi, everybody.
Maybe your name could be like the Reem, like Alistair Overeem. Anyone ever call you that?
No one's ever called me that. I think that's taken, though. I don't want to have to share with Alistair.
Well, he can have it. I think it's a shitty name.
Yeah,
anytime they add the to it, like the Donald or whatever, I think it's so fucking lame. Rahim is a nice name in and of itself. So let's get started on mixed martial arts, Amira, because lots of great cards have happened recently, and it's amazing because the big story obviously was Fox this year, UFC signing with Fox and their high expectations for that, but a lot of people have also brought up the fact that their buy rates have not done too well in, I guess, really the second quarter. After the Toronto show with GSP, it seemed to kind of dip. And if you look at their two top pay-per-view draws, Lesnar and GSP, by the time the year ends, they'll have only been one fight each and very far apart. Now, I don't know what they did pretty much starting from September on, because we know Quentin Jackson's a big draw too, and he had that loss to Jon Jones in September, but just as an MMA fan, really from September on, a lot of these cards that people dismiss because maybe there isn't a big name on it still end up being great. And the cards before that too, really. UFC rarely fails to deliver a card from top to bottom, and it really shows the depth of their roster when they could have GSP get hurt and Nick Diaz is without an opponent for the October pay-per-view and they fill in BJ Penn, and it's still an awesome fight. We see this happen a lot, especially when these fighters are utilizing the insurance coverage they now have, but it really just shows the great depth that they have in the roster. For instance, how many times has Rashad Evans not gotten to fight Jon Jones, but Lyoto Machida was a very interesting substitute style-wise. So there's just been so many great cards. We talked about 138 and how it was largely unknowns from the UK fighters, but still great show. And Ultimate Fighter 14 had their finale on Saturday, December 3rd from the Pearl at the Palms in Las Vegas. And it was yet another good show, I thought. But let's talk about some of the bigger fights that night. First up, the bantamweight final. John Dodson got the first-round TKO victory over TJ Dillashaw. As good of a fighter as I think John Dodson is, I really think this stoppage was bullshit. I understand that you want to end a fight like that sooner rather than later just for the sake of the fighter's health, but I think if Dillashaw had been given a couple extra seconds, he might have secured that takedown that he was clearly going for. I don't think he was really out. And as much as Joe Rogan was saying this was a good stoppage, I don't know why the people were booing, I would have been booing too.
I wasn't super upset about the stoppage. It really didn't look that bad to me until I saw the replay from the opposite side where you could see Dillashaw trying to get up. The referee doesn't get to see a replay, and I could see why he stopped it, given that he has a couple seconds to make that decision. Plus, even though obviously you never know what's going to happen in a fight, I don't really think that was going to turn out much different if it had gone on longer. Dillashaw looked really lost on his feet. Having seen the entire season, I've seen all these guys fight a couple times now, and I think John Dodson's is really something special. He has great technique, but he also has something that a lot of the smaller guys don't have, which is power. During the show, he had a brutal knockout on Johnny Bedford, who's a much bigger guy. He's actually the guy that fought first on the Ultimate Fighter finale show, the one that beat the guy with green hair. So he really put a beating on that guy. So Dodson actually knocked him out, and there's a gigantic size difference there. Also, personality-wise, he's going to annoy a lot of people, which I think is actually a really good thing, because these new, smaller weight classes need guys with personalities, and they need guys the UFC will see as marketable stars. And Dodson really does kind of have that love him or hate him thing going. That's a good thing. I think he's a great fighter, and he's somebody that they'll actually try to do something with. With regard to Dillashaw, he's going to get another shot. I really wouldn't worry about him not getting to fight there again. He's with Team Alpha Male. He's a fantastic wrestler. He's likely going to be a fantastic MMA fighter, but maybe needs to work on being a little more rounded, especially with his stand-up, when he's going to start fighting these top guys.
I don't know about love or hate John Dodson, because I'm really right in the middle. I get a great feeling from this kid. I remember years ago, at this point, it's years, I was saying, Jon Jones, this guy, you put him in the cage with the champion, he wins. And no one agreed with me at the time or had their doubts, and we see exactly what happened. I don't want to jump to conclusions and say that about John Dodson, but for his division, wow, this kid, I see a lot of good things in. He's very skilled, very unique. However, he's into I'm trying too hard territory with this character bullshit to me, because that stupid, phony, forced laugh I just don't care for.
Initially, I didn't think it was a good stoppage, and now I still don't think it's a good stoppage. TJ still had something left. He was clearly going for a single. He didn't seem out of it. I think he still had something left in him, but a stoppage is a stoppage. We could cry about it, but I think he still has a future in the UFC. As far as Dodson goes, he's really athletic, and as she said, he's really got that power that even I think the champion Dominic Cruz kind of lacks. I'd like to see what he does at 35, but now with the announcement of the 125-pound weight class being introduced to the UFC in March, I see Dodson making a jump down that weight, and I think he could really do some damage. I feel like this is one of the ultimate fighters that could really be a star. I mean, we haven't seen on the Ultimate Fighter at least a winner be a star, probably since Nate Diaz. Ryan Bader was close, but Ryan Bader's stardom was derailed in February by Jon Jones. I think Dodson could really pull together here. He could pull some big wins. I think he could really, like she said, bring some marketability, some personality to the lighterweights and bring a lot of attention.
Well, since you brought up the flyweight division, I guess let's talk about that for a minute, because yes, it was revealed, I believe March 3rd will be the first show that has essentially the first round of a mini-tournament, or semifinals, to crown the first UFC flyweight champion, the 125-pound division, as they expand internationally. Just earlier today, they announced the coaches for Ultimate Fighter Brazil, which will be going on the same time as the Ultimate Fighter here domestically on FX, with Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz, I believe. So we're starting to see the beginnings of what Dana White wants to be the World Cup of the Ultimate Fighter. And when you go to different countries like that, like a lot of the Asian countries and Latin countries too, you're going to see a lot more lighter fighters. And I think that's part of their international strategy to introduce the 125-pound division. Plus, Amira, we're seeing even Demetrius Johnson is already making the cut. So it's going to be something else added to UFC's roster. 8 title divisions, and this still hasn't included women. So let's see your thoughts, Amira, because I'm sure you're really excited about this as a fan of the lighter fighters. of the flyweight division.
Oh, of course. I'm so happy to see them doing this. Yeah, it's actually Demetrius Johnson and Joseph Benavidez are both officially dropping down to flyweight, which makes total sense for both of them. That's the division they belong in. But I am actually really thrilled to see them bringing in Ian McCall, who is widely considered currently the best flyweight in the world. He's the Tachi Palace Fights flyweight champion, and that's really one of the only organizations that has a legitimate flyweight division right now. And he is a hell of a fighter. He actually fought a few times way back in like 07, 08 in WEC as a bantamweight and was actually part of one of my favorite WEC fights when he fought Charlie Valencia. So that's awesome that they're bringing in guys outside of UFC who are already established in this weight class. Really looking forward to that tournament. And, yeah, you're going to see some wild fights in that division, so that's a great thing they're doing that.
The other lighter division that had a finale at Ultimate Fighter 14 was the featherweights, 145-pound. That was Diego Brandao in a much more decisive, clean-cut finish than the bantamweight final, as he tapped out Dennis Bermudez in the first round with like 8 seconds left or so, with a armbar submission that was very nasty and very awesome. Great fight. Great fight this was, yes. Brandao coming back from what looked like a knockout, securing Bermudez's arm when he let his guard down and flipping him over. And watching the replay back, it almost looked to me as if Bermudez was tapping before he even got flipped. So it seemed as if the flip prevented him from tapping even further, and the referee didn't catch it the first time, and unfortunately it looks like Bermudez broke his arm. That was very nasty, but awesome. So your thoughts, Amira, on the featherweight final?
Yeah, that was crazy. Definitely one of the best reversals I've seen. I think Diego has tons of potential and a lot of heart. I do think, and also from having seen his fights during the season, I think now that he's going to be fighting the top-level featherweights, he's going to need to add a little more discipline and technique to his stand-up, because the whole reason that reversal even happened is he was on the ground taking heavy shots, because he tends to just run in at guys, and that's how you get caught. When he starts fighting guys who have a ton of skill and aren't afraid of him, he is going to be setting himself up for that kind of thing a lot. As cool as that reversal was, he's really lucky that Bermudez got sloppy with his shots on the ground and put himself in a position to do that. But like I said, tons of potential, and if he works on just the little holes in his game, he could definitely really be something.
Seems like he prefers his fights on the ground, and it's interesting that it's kind of like the little Junior Dos Santos story where he's coming up poor in Brazil and all he wants to do is make a successful fighting career, and I don't even play video games or Facebook. I have no time for that. Just fighting. It's a cute story and a great win. Rodney?
First, can I just say how impressed I am by Amira's analysis of these fights? Like, wow. Like, I'm just pretty impressed. Number one.
Are you impressed because she has a vagina?
No. That's not it at all. That doesn't matter. But she's almost saying my words before I even say them. This was one of the best rounds I've seen in a while. Like, technical-wise, it was a very back-and-forth fight. Like, this is a fight that I wish that was on Fox with the mainstream push, the mainstream audience, so people could see the technicality of mixed martial arts and how great these athletes are and how back-and-forth a fight could be. A great win for Diego. He was a favorite to begin with in the beginning. I know other fighters were kind of hesitant in the house to go against him, and I see why. I mean, he was one of the favorites. He lived up to expectations. There's definitely some holes in this game. I feel like he could even work in his wrestling a little more and be more accurate with his striking. But his submissions, that submission that he got off his back with the arm bar was very slick. Didn't come out of nowhere, but he was just very slick with it. Great transitions on the ground. Let's see what he could do at 145. I'm really excited. Once he gets more and more disciplined in his training, try to fix those holes. It's going to take time. No one is perfect in mixed martial arts. You're always learning every day. I'm excited to see this guy grow.
You know who else is a fan of Amira, Rodney?
Who's that?
We've got a fan in Germany. Corey sent along this message to me. She got an email from our fan in Germany who really loves listening to our show. In fact, we've gotten a lot of great feedback on Twitter, actually, about our MMA coverage, and this fan of ours in Germany who listens to our show to learn better English is a fan of Amira's analysis. Isn't that what the email said, Corey?
That's correct. And my friend Simon, who lives out in Germany, is a big fan of Amira. He said that he likes her style on the Wrestling Roundtable because she actually goes into what she likes or doesn't like about specific matches. She goes into great details, and he says he very much appreciates that.
I think we all do, so We're glad to have you aboard, Amira, if we haven't made that clear before.
Oh, well, thank you guys. And if I heard correctly at the beginning, Rodney is a jiu-jitsu guy?
Yes, yeah. I just got my blue belt in July.
So now we have a jiu-jitsu guy and a Muay Thai girl. So we have a well-rounded MMA panel now.
Well, I just started my kickboxing classes today, too.
The weed doesn't count.
All right. Well, you also forgot to mention that you've won medals in Grappler's Quest and Naga, too. So, oh, yeah, and your regional win in high school wrestling, too, back in 2000. Anyway, let's move on to the main event of the Ultimate Fighter finale, which was the coaches fighting for the first time on TV in a while, the middleweights of Michael Bisping and Jason Mayhem Miller. Mayhem didn't really live up to the hype, so to speak, in his UFC return. He had one fight in UFC previously and had been fighting in Japan and other places since then. He went down in the third round. TKO, and he looked gassed, Chris Lieben style. They kept calling it an adrenaline dump, which sounds dirty. It sounds also like Ultimate Warrior suffered that at WrestleMania 6. They should have said that, adrenaline dump, adrenaline dump. But anyway, Mayhem Miller really ran out of gas, and they could have stopped that fight maybe like 20 seconds earlier, and it wouldn't have been questionable, I don't think. As much as people say Jason Mayhem Miller is one of the top middleweights in the world, etc., well, his last win in MMA before this was against Kazushi Sakuraba in Dream, and really, who isn't beating Sakuraba at this point in his career? Now Michael Bisping is in the mix for really title contention. He's pretty much up for like number 2 contender right now. Before we get to that, what are your thoughts on Bisping's performance? He has won, I think, 4 or 5 fights in a row.
Yeah, that was painful, that whole fight. I really do like Jason Miller. I mean, despite this just unbelievably bad performance, he's not a terrible fighter by any means, but I've had the benefit of seeing a lot of his Japanese stuff and his stuff from Strikeforce, not all of which was against Sakuraba type people that were past their prime, or he's fought some legitimate guys. But unfortunately, there's probably a lot of UFC fans that this was their first time seeing him, and that really sucks for him. I don't know what happened here. I mean, clearly his cardio failed real bad, but I don't know if that was from cutting too much weight or if the pressure of the whole situation got to him or what, but I've never seen him fight that badly before. That said, I also don't think this said a ton for Bisping, that he didn't look spectacular against someone who came in with just nothing. And if Bisping brought that game to an Anderson Silva or a Chael Sonnen, he would have gotten murdered. So I really don't think that win should put him real close to title contention.
Well, actually, that's going to connect to our poll results a little later on, so keep Michael Bisping in mind. Rodney, your thoughts on Mayhem? I'm a fan of Mayhem's personality and his character, but this wasn't a good first impression for lots of people in his UFC return, and Bisping won. Your thoughts?
I have to disagree where he said in the beginning where he didn't really live up to the hype, because I really didn't think there was a lot of hype behind this guy coming into this fight, at least not the Jake Shields hype coming into his fight last October.
I think it was more on the internet than necessarily put out there by UFC.
Yeah, I was not a fan of Mayhem probably up until I started watching the show and got to know him better, even a few episodes of Bully Being Down and seeing him in Strikeforce and everything. I just wasn't a fan of the goofy entrances. I felt like he was taking his position in mixed martial arts for granted and turning his profession into this goofy act.
Too WWE for you?
Not even WWE. just goofy. And so I started watching the show and started seeing him, and Ultimate Fighter actually made me a fan of his. And I thought this would actually be a competitive battle. I don't know what happened. I mean, people could say it's the UFC jitters, but in an arena like that where there's maybe like 25 to 3,500 people, I really don't get that, especially when you fought in Japan and you fought in Strikeforce.
Dream in a huge building, and this is where they have Strikeforce Challenger shows now.
Exactly. I think that Bisping proves he's a better man, but I don't think Bisping proved that he's title contention yet. So I've heard that the winner Mark Nunes and Chael Sonnen's going to get the winner. Ultimate Fighter Brazil coach is fighting Vitor Belfort and Vanderlei Silva, so who knows what's going to happen with there. So he's in the mix. He's definitely in the top 4 or 5 guys But I think he needs one more decisive win over one of those guys to prove that he's ready for the title, because he would be laying on his back just like UFC 100 if he went against Anderson Silva with that performance.
Well, last we know of, coming up on Fox 2, the second Fox show, Charles Sonnen and Mark Munoz will be facing, and the winner gets the title shot against Anderson Silva. On the same card, Michael Bisping and Damian Maia, and then whoever wins that gets the next shot. So, being that you two have already brought up Michael's standing in the middleweight division, someone brought up an interesting question on the Facebook group page, and I'll pose it to you. How many wins in a row does someone have to get a title shot? And the way I answered it, let's see what you think, but the way I answered it myself was, yeah, Bisping's won a bunch of fights in a row, but against who? Is it the upper echelon of his division? Not really. I've not seen, and he's an okay fighter, but I've not seen anything from him that says this guy can hang with the elite of Anderson Silva or even a Charles Sonnen and those type of guys. Someone said in response to me that they love to do Bisping and Anderson Silva in the UK, giving one of the hometown guys a title shot because they haven't been giving the UK cards big fights like that just yet, but we'll see about that. Point being, Bisping, he shouldn't be in the contention necessarily just yet. I want to see him get a win over some of the more higher ranking. I know there's no official rankings, but you know what I mean. Some of the more worthy contenders. So how many wins in a row do you think justify it, or is it the type of wins that matter, Amira?
Oh, it's definitely the type of wins. I mean, you can't put a specific number on it, because if you're going to do that, then there's a million guys that are undefeated in local shows who apparently are all ready for title shots if it's just number of wins. It's definitely level of competition. He specifically needs to beat someone who's viewed as also being in title contention. All these wins that he's had have been all over guys either on the same level as him or lower level than him. That doesn't earn you a title shot when they have other options. I think sometimes that kind of thing happens when they get a real fit in division, but in this case, that doesn't make any sense.
I agree. It really depends on who you're fighting and how you finish the fights. If you have 5 wins in a row and they're all razor-thin split decisions, then you're not ready to face the top guy in that division. But say if you have 2 big wins over 2 top contenders and you finish it in 2 rounds, then you can show that you're ready. It's quality and not quantity, and it's a business too. UFC knows not to just to put anybody just looking at the record. It's how they are, it's who they're facing, and if they're capable and if they're ready for that main event.
UFC 140 is the next show we're going to talk about Saturday, December 10th, this past Saturday, from Air Canada Centre in Toronto. UFC returned to Toronto, and outside of Jones and Machida, I didn't see a lot of hype going into the rest of the card, but once again, UFC really delivered an awesome show, pretty much from top to bottom. It's been like that really since September, and it's going to continue all the way on through into the next year. I am jacked as shit for the February return to Japan. That card is insane, and this card was really good too. So starting off with the featherweight division, Amira, I'm glad to see Chan Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie, do so well this year, because I've said before on the show, and it's really directed to guys like Jose Aldo who haven't lived up to the hype that we see in the packages so far in UFC, but I really think a lot of these WEC guys are shining through lately. Obviously, Ben Henderson, Dominic Cruz has had some good performances, I think, and a lot of these lighter guys, featherweights and bantamweights. Donald Cerrone, oh man, that fight he's got coming up on the Brock show against Nate Diaz, that is going to be a war, and I can't wait to see that.
That's contention to steal fight of the year.
It could. And, yeah, a lot of these WEC guys are starting to come through, and I am loving it. Korean Zombie, in this case, tied the record for the fastest knockout in UFC history at 7 seconds in the first round against Mark Hominick. Felt really bad for Mark Hominick. This is a guy, when he last fought in Toronto earlier this year at the Stadium show, had a great 5th round against Jose Aldo. Looked like he might actually beat him. He just got caught. That's really just simply what it was. Right punch, right to the face, perfect timing. I hear people saying, like, Korean Zombie is now not only up for knockout of the year, but submission of the year, too. That great twister he used on Leonard Garcia earlier this year. Korean Zombie looking awesome. I wish the hype machine would go more into this guy. Market that T-shirt, UFC.
That was amazing. Makes me happy to see a featherweight tied for the fastest KO, considering how much people think that they don't knock people out. So that's awesome. I mean, yeah, there's not much to say about the fight. It was so fast, but definitely, like you said, between this and pulling off that twister, he's the highlight machine. He's awesome. And, yeah, I can't wait to see what he's going to do next year.
I thought it was great. Up until against the Jose Aldo fight in Toronto, I wasn't a fan of Mark Hominick for the same reason that you don't like Frankie Edgar. I just didn't like the way he looks. I thought he was a goofy. I thought he had a big forehead, a dumb haircut, and I just didn't like him.
Yeah, a much bigger forehead by the end of that fight.
Oh, yeah, trust me. He had 3 foreheads. After the Jose Aldo fight, he gained my respect. He probably did the best against him. No one else has done that well before or after. And in this fight, he just got caught, and the Korean Zombie just showed that he is improving. He is a real martial artist and just not someone who just could go in there and brawl, but he's going to be aggressive. And I think that people really get behind this guy, considering that, like, not a lot of people do that besides Fedor for people who are non-English speaking. And I think they really have something here, and they can really build them up. And I think if he just knocks out the former number 1 contender in 7 seconds, then he's 1 or 2 fights away from going against Jose Aldo, or at least the winner of Jose Aldo and Chad Mendes.
Shouldn't do this all the time, and I try not to. But you know, Rodney, as wrestling fans, we can't help sometimes compare the two. And I'm going to right now, just because the 7-second knockout, doesn't it really show you anything can fucking happen? And what I've already said about the cards so far, this fall had great cards. We still have another good card. Like, I know a lot of people are overlooking the undercard with Nate Diaz and Donald Cerrone and Vladimir Matyushenko, etc., on the Lesnar-Overeem card coming up on the 31st, because the main event's getting all the hype.
John Fish and Hendricks.
Right, it's a good card. And like I said, going into February, even before we get to Japan, we got Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes. On Japan, I want to see that whole show.
We got the Carlos Condit and Diaz card.
Yep, and I don't know how we can see all the prelims when it comes to Japan, but I want to see them all. I want to see the whole show. One thing you may notice, pay-per-view buyers, if you're spending money on UFC pay-per-views, you're not seeing the exact same people fight each other every single show. It's not even the same people in the main event. It's the same people against one another. Jesus Christ. But anyway,
I don't get it.
Between the variety and unpredictability, UFC takes the cake. But anyway, let's not compare apples to oranges or whatever people say. Let's move on to the welterweight division, because Brian Ebersole, Brian Ebersole got the split decision victory over Claude Patrick. Ebersole is a veteran. This guy's 31 years old, but he's got over 60 fights, I believe. And he got the win here, following up his Speedo-killing victory over Dennis Hallman in Philadelphia earlier this year. So, Amira, you wanted to talk about Ebersole's victory over Patrick.
This particular fight was not the world's most spectacular fight to watch. I think what we had there was two guys who kind of had the exact same game plan and had a lot of trouble executing it on each other, until the third round when Ebersole was clearly dominant in that. But I just thought it was worth mentioning that Brian Ebersole has really had an amazing year in UFC. You're right, he has had a crap load of fights before he was in UFC, but it was actually his debut for UFC at 127, and he was really just a random nobody that filled in for Carlos Condit when he was injured against Chris Lytle. I remember watching that fight at a bar, and out comes this guy with an arrow shaved into his chest hair pointing at his face, and everybody's just like, who is this fucking idiot that's about to get killed? And then he proceeded to put a beating on Chris Lytle like nobody's business. And that's a pretty awesome way to start your UFC career. The win over Dennis Hallman during Speedogate, and now Claude Patrick. I think he's definitely somebody to look out for what he's going to be doing in the upcoming year. Kind of one of the guys that sort of, I think of when people talk about the people that had big years, kind of somebody that's gone under the radar, but definitely worth mentioning.
I hope Donald Cerrone goes mentioned when that talk comes up too, but we'll see how he does against Nate Diaz. That's going to be pretty close. But let's go on to the light heavyweight division. Not the title fight, but first up, Antonio Rogero Nogueira, Little Nog, defeated Tito Ortiz in the first round, really with strikes to the body, TKO finish. It sucked. I mean, I've got nothing against Little Nog, good for him, but I really wanted that feel-good win for Tito Ortiz because he hasn't done too well since coming back to UFC. His record since coming back is not very good. I think he's only had one win, and as good as it was, didn't help him against Rashad Evans. I haven't heard any sort of injury update. It seemed like he might have gotten some cracked ribs or something at the time, but no update on that yet. He has tweeted since then, though, that he's going to regroup and hopes to fight next year in what will be his last fight, so he says. So, as much of a downer as it was for me, it was still a good performance by Little Nog.
Yeah, that was sad. I mean, my cat's named Tito, so of course I like Tito.
That's after Jackson, though.
Yeah. He really came out with a vengeance, and he looked good for like a minute, and then he got caught with that body shot and just crumbled, which is much the same thing that happened in his fight with Rashad.
Yep.
I think he's done. I understand why he wants to get that last fight on his contract. I guess I wouldn't mind seeing him get that last fight if they can match him up with somebody who's at a similar point in their career. I'm not sure off the top of my head who that would be. I know he's been talking about wanting Forrest Griffin.
Ken Shamrock.
I don't know about that, but that's the only way I can see it is if they can find somebody like really comparable for him to fight.
A lot of the legends are going to the wayside this year. Rodney?
Yeah, I agree. I thought that Little Nog, besides his knockout win over Louis Kane, hasn't looked that great either. I mean, his fight against Jason Brels was pretty controversial, that win at least. He lost against two guys basically to wrestling. Tito, I think, is more well-rounded than both Phil Davis and Ryan Bader, so I thought this could be a pretty competitive fight, being that these are two seasoned MMA fighters. But I feel like once Tito got hurt, he went right in defense mode. Yeah, it just wasn't great to see. It wasn't the same Tito that I started watching. And once he was on the ground, I saw that he kept going for submissions, which would have been insane considering he almost submitted Leo Machida a few years back.
He was dying to lock on that triangle.
Yeah, he kept going for the wrist, kept trying to pull it back, but it's hard to do that against a Brazilian black belt. I absolutely agree 100% that he should get another fight. He was the face of the company back when no one was really buying UFC, back in the dark ages of UFC. He was the dominant light heavyweight champion for 3 years. I mean, he helped bring the UFC back into light with his feud with Ken Shamrock. He's always a great promoter, not only of himself, not only for UFC, but for mixed martial arts in general. And I feel like he's always a personality. He's always a great personality of mixed martial arts. Whether people love him or hate him, people still will always chant his name 1 year from now or 10 years from now when they show gray-haired Tito Ortiz in the crowd. I think for its last fight, I think it should be against Forrest Griffin. Forrest has mentioned it in passing, saying how mixed martial arts isn't part of his passion anymore. He just has a kid, so that changes a lot of his priorities. And it's the third fight for them. It's a trilogy fight. They're both 1-1, each of them winning split decisions. They have the same fighting style, same build. I think it's something that makes sense, and they're both pretty much towards the end of their careers, probably more Tito than Forrest, but they're not the same fighters that they were when they fought back in 2006. So I think that that's the last fight. Tito definitely deserves one fight. It wasn't like he was getting knocked unconscious like Chuck Liddell. He definitely deserves one fight, and as far as Little Nog, he did great as far as capitalizing, but I just don't know how he'd do up against top 5 light heavyweights.
Little Nog said in the post-fight press conference that it feels like whenever he loses, his brother wins, and whenever his brother wins, he loses. Unfortunately, it did not go well for Big Nog, because in the heavyweight divisions fight that night, Frank Mir defeated Antonio Rodrigo Minotauro Nogueira. That's my favorite Bruce Buffer introduction because it's so long. It's like reading a sentence. But great first round fight up until the finish, which was, I didn't cringe as much as everyone else watching. I didn't think it was quite in Tim Sylvia armbar territory, but that Kimura, you could see. Well, actually, the X-ray, if you've seen that, the arm broke towards the elbow, and it looked like the shoulder just popped out to me. But Big Nog has said since then that he's not going to have surgery for it. He's going to have it in a plastic cast and rehab it or some shit like that. And they're hoping to get back into the fighting game in 9 months or something like that. But Big Nog was looking good with those straight jabs. He seemed to rock Frank Mir, and Frank Mir, I think, just has this great ability to not panic, to be calm, and he just showed what great jiu-jitsu he has, especially when he locked in the Kimura, or was going for it, and Nog's trying to evade it, and he just locked it in. They rolled around, and then he popped him.
This was another amazing reversal that we saw, because he was getting beat on by Nogueira there for a while. Mir's got two of these kind of sickening breaks now with submissions. It was good to see Frank Mir look dominant again in a finish. He's coming off some really lackluster fights. If you remember the Crow Cop fight, that was not a good fight.
One of the worst main events I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was dreadful. So it's good to see him kind of getting back to something, especially with there being talk now that he's potentially in line for a title shot, depending on what happens with Brock and Overeem. So it's good to see him kind of doing something again that's memorable, because he was really sort of on a slide for a while despite actually getting some wins. So, yeah, kind of rough to watch, but good to see him doing something again.
Big Nog, this was, I believe, his 41st fight in MMA, so I'm glad at least he's saying now it's not over quite yet, but you can see the mileage on these guys' faces. I think he's only 35 or so. He looked 20 years older than he actually is. I'm glad it didn't end this way, and he did look good in the fight he won in Brazil in August, but, yeah, here, not quite so. Rodney, what do you think about the finish in the sense that should Big Nog, and he did tap out after the break, but Frank Mir said he felt that he wasn't going to tap, so he broke it, and that's essentially what happened, and a lot of people are criticizing Big Nog. He's being stupid because he should have tapped and not risked ending his career or career-ending injury. So what are your thoughts on that, or is pride still alive?
If he wasn't feeling pressure, why would he tap for a fighter who hasn't tapped? I don't think he or anyone else would have expected Frank Mir to work that Kimura in a sense to break his arm.
As you mentioned, Frank Mir is the first guy to stop Big Nog in both ways. He's the first to knock him out and the first to tap him.
Yeah. Well,
I think he has his number.
He has his number, exactly. I was watching this event at a bar, and I actually was listening to these two guys talk when Nogueira was walking out, and one guy goes, "Wait, who's that?" And the other guy told him that this was the same guy that just beat up Tito Ortiz. Like, he actually thought that he was fighting twice in a row, and I had to step in and correct him. I'm like, really, there's still a lot of educating that needs to be going on, because I don't know in what mind, like, did Mike Tyson ever fight twice in a night? Would Pacquiao fight back-to-back? I mean, come on. And, like, the guy noticed, because he noticed that Little Nog had a tattoo on his chest. And he goes, "Wait a minute, no, that's not him. The other guy had a tattoo on his chest." And I was like, "That's his brother, they're identical twins, yada, yada, yada. This is the heavyweight match." So, yeah, that was just an interesting note.
Too. That would have been really old school UFC if he had fought twice in one night. You should have been like, "No, exactly. That's the background soldier from the Expendables."
But as far as the fight goes, I thought it was UFC 111 again with Shane Carwin pounding out Frank Mir. He kind of toppled over in the exact same way, and I was foreseeing a stoppage until he got to the ground and he went for the guillotine. And this was the jiu-jitsu match that I was looking forward to at UFC 92. I think that most of the world was looking forward to. I thought it was great on the ground. I thought it was a great fight once that started. And Frank Mir really showed his jiu-jitsu skills that he hasn't portrayed in a while. I'm happy for him. Great for the win. The first man to really make Nogueira submit, and I don't think anyone would have expected that. I would have really loved to see the Vegas odds on that fight. As far as Mir goes, I would like to see him put up against the upper tier guys now. I mean, he's 5-2 in his last 7 fights. Only losses are to Brock and Shane Carwin. It's hard because with Mir, you know, if he faces a great striker like Velasquez or Dos Santos, a few hits will put him down on the ground pretty easy, like we saw the other night. So it's really hard to really have so much credibility and put so much stock in Frank Mir from one performance. It's really tough to tell, but I guess with UFC, you just have to wait and see who they match him up against.
You're talking about educating people on MMA, Rodney. You are the grappler on the panel right now. You have heard of a technical submission, correct?
A technical submission? I've heard the term. I don't think I've ever seen one.
Well, we did in the main event, because that's what Jon Jones got over Lyoto Machida. I just bring that up because I was talking to BJJ Blue Belt a few months ago, and he had never heard the term, and I was astounded. I know it's not as widely used or widely known, but I explained the situation. It's when a choke or submission is applied, like the standing guillotine that Jon Jones used, and the fighter who's in the hold doesn't tap. He's choked out, the referee stops it. He said, no, that's a TKO. And I said, no, it's a technical submission. I believe that was the official decision here. So if you didn't know what a technical submission was, I mean, there's technical knockout, there's technical submission too, and that's what the finish was. Jon Jones using a very vicious standing guillotine on Lyoto Machida after elbowing his head open on the ground. Vicious cut. They actually stopped to take a look at it. I think it was too bad. I kind of thought the fight would continue as it did, but it didn't last too much longer. He knocked Lyoto down with a strike, and then when Lyoto was trying to get back up to his feet, caught him in that standing guillotine, and Machida didn't tap. He was out by the time the refs stepped in. Now, I believe, and I may be wrong, but I believe you saw my text way too late, because after the first round, I tweeted that Machida won the first round, because I was shocked. And I think he did. Apparently some judges scored it the other way, but I think Machida actually took the first round. I think he landed more strikes. Jones seemed more cautious, and I don't really think he did anything to get the 10 in that round. So I actually gave the score for the first round to Machida. Didn't make a difference because we saw how it ended in the second. So let's see what you think about the main event, Machida and Jones. Who is going to beat Jon Jones? Rodney?
Me? Oh, I didn't know if you're talking to me or You. Machida is actually one of the guys who I thought that could beat Jon Jones, probably more so than Rashad Evans. And I was pretty nervous, and everyone is counting Machida out. And I tweeted, I was like, I'm very nervous right now for Jon Jones, because Machida has that style that I guess could match closest opposite Jon Jones and could really confuse him. And he's more seasoned. He's not someone that you could train for and be prepared for. It's always something going to be coming out of left field with Machida. And we saw it in the first round. Machida was really doing well with his blitzes coming in and really tagging Jon Jones. And you heard the crowd react, and Jon Jones proved he could take a hit. But not only that, he stayed calm. He didn't panic. It was definitely a feeling out round. I expected the first minute to be a feeling out round. But I was so impressed the fact that he choked Lyoto Machida unconscious, a guy who I was there in Vegas when Lyoto Machida won the belt from Rashad Evans, and that's when the whole Machida era started, and from then on I thought that there was going to be nobody to beat Lyoto Machida. But now seeing this,
it's only his third loss, officially.
Yeah, his third loss. But as far as Jon Jones goes, I thought once he was able to play his game and take him down, and you see with his past opponents, whenever he takes someone down, that's pretty much it. Even the last fight with Quentin Jackson, he got him in the front headlock, tripped him, and once he got on top of Quentin, that was the end of the road with a rear naked choke. And here, he did it very subtly. He didn't panic, and it was a very smooth transition. It's almost something that a bouncer would do to someone at a club, that kind of choke. It really was subtle. He has long arms, so it's very bony, and it is really probably a vicious choke that probably sunk in really quick and hard to defend. And he put his hips into it, and those lights out. And right now, I think Rashad has the best chance to beat him because Rashad is very well-rounded. His stand-up has come a long way since winning the Ultimate Fighter. He has great wrestling, but his size just doesn't compare to Jones, and it's going to be hard for him, and I just don't think that he's going to be able to do any ground and pound or anything to Jon Jones.
Did you ever use that choke at Bar A?
Luckily, I didn't have to.
Well, I thought Machida, again in the first round, did a great job of closing the distance, considering that Jones had the reach advantage, and I think that's really what stopped Quentin Jackson in the fight that he had in September. I think he couldn't navigate that, really, or figure out a way around it. And Machida, again, he looked pretty good. And again, yes, his last fight before this was Randy Couture. He was really put into this title match because Rashad Evans wasn't ready for like the third time. But even considering all that, just on paper, I thought it was a good matchup. And even though, like you said, a lot of people were dismissing Machida or writing him off, I thought it was going to end up being a great fight, and it was promoted as such. The art in mixed martial art comes alive. Did you enjoy it, Amira?
Yeah, and I agree with you. Machida, I absolutely thought Machida won round one. I saw that thing with the two judges giving it to Jones, too, and that's baffling.
2 out of 3, fuck that.
There's MMA judging for you.
Hey, Jeff Blatnick was one of the judges, and I love that because Jeff Blatnick and Big John McCarthy were in the same building. That's old school UFC.
Machida really is the first guy that figured out how to do something to Jon Jones. I mean, pretty much everyone else that he's fought has just immediately seemed thrown off their game and completely lost. Really, no one else has put up much of a fight, and Machida figured out how to get in there on him. And I thought the one vulnerability that we did actually see in Jon Jones is when he was losing the striking battles, he started throwing very wild and very inaccurate shots. And I think, and I'm not saying that I could think of a person right now currently there that could do this, but I think the person who will be able to actually do something with him is going to be a top-level unorthodox striker who has really good takedown defense. Because once he gets you on the ground, that's kind of it, especially with his really long limbs. Ronnie talked about that does help you with submissions. He's definitely outsizing a lot of these guys. He's definitely outreaching most of these guys. But he does seem to get thrown off if he starts losing the striking battle. Jones throws unorthodox strikes, but when he gets flustered, doesn't seem to throw them with a ton of accuracy. It was only one round, but we did finally see a weakness in Jon Jones, which we really hadn't seen before.
Whoever fights him next really has to be cautious of his chokes because he's had not only 4 fights this year, not only did he finish 4 fights this year, not only did he, in 1 year, beat undefeated fellow light heavyweight, win the title, and defend it twice, but he's had 3 wins by choke, two guillotine and 1 rear naked. So I feel like whoever trains for him next really has to be cautious of his chokes because he has choked 3 people out in 3 different ways. I feel like that's something that the next person, whether it's Dan Henderson or Rashad Evans, they really need to be cautious for.
Yeah, they don't get the same highlight reel emphasis as the spinning back elbow and German suplex and all that other stuff he does. That's all great and spectacular, but yeah, you're right. They do need to take all of that into consideration. And if we're talking about unorthodox strikes, Amira, I think we need to go back to Friday, December 2nd, live on HDNet. That's XFC 15 Tribute, because it's gotten a lot of play since then, and rightfully so, because in the lightweight division that night, Nick Newell beat Dennis Hernandez. If you don't know who that is, Nick Newell is a all-state wrestling champion, won lots of wrestling titles in college and whatnot, and he's 6-0, undefeated. This was his 6th win. He got the first-round submission with a heel hook. For our wrestling fans, he was the roommate of Kurt Hawkins. And as the announcers went into detail, they used to watch Raw on Monday night and then flip over to Ultimate Fighter right afterwards. Well, actually, they didn't flip at all. It was on the same channel back then. And one continued on into pro wrestling and the other went into MMA. So we know how that turned out. But the other thing that stands out about Nick Newell, he's got half a left arm. He was born with a congenital disorder. The arm goes only up to just past the elbow, really, on his left side. Like I said, he's undefeated, 6-0. He got a heel hook with this one. I think it's kind of unsettling at first seeing this arm throw strikes, although if you think about it, there's no padding on the elbows for any other fighter as it is. But there is that, I guess, stub or bone or whatever, so I kind of worry about that. But as it is, obviously with his wrestling background and just the amount of energy and drive he has, he's undefeated. He's earned it. He's pretty impressive. So what'd you think of that fight?
This was just really cool to see. Yeah, it was a slick submission. If you watch how he transitioned into it, it was actually very, very cool. It's great to see somebody who's out there doing that would obviously be viewed as somebody with a major disadvantage. Goes to show talent really does come in all shapes and sizes. It's cool to see. Definitely check it out.
We're going to move on to pro wrestling in a little bit, but first up are the polls. And I mentioned Michael Bisping before, and that's going to connect with a poll that I put up recently. Again, Michael Bisping was making a case before he even had the fight with Jason Mayhem Miller that he should be getting a title shot, and I was like, what are you talking about? So yes, this was up before either Kung Lee or Mark Munoz had their fights, so ignore that per se. But the poll was, who would make a better opponent for Anderson Silva than Michael Bisping? 8% voted for Kung Lee, and that was a tie with Michael Myers from the Halloween movies. Mark Munoz got 13%. Steven Seagal got 21%, teacher versus student. Hornswoggle came in second with 23%. And number one for who'd make a better opponent for Anderson Silva than Michael Bisping, the Terminator, who got 27% of the vote. The other poll was, who should the next This Is Your Life segment be on? Mick Foley recently came back to WWE with another This Is Your Life segment for John Cena, featuring B2, Bull Buchanan returning, and The Rock, and John Cena's dad, and all that other shit. So, who do you want to see get a This Is Your Life segment on Raw next? Jameson got 3% of the vote. Brackus got 5% of the vote. And that was my vote, Rodney, because if he came out, the first question I'd ask is, what the fuck were you doing at Stu Hart's birthday party at Wrestling with Shadows? I think that's the biggest unsolved mystery in wrestling. What the fuck was that?
They should have asked that on the Montreal DVD.
5% went to Randy Orton, which would be very interesting when they get to him winning his first title from nobody. And maybe Barry O, his uncle, would come out for that. 15% went to Jerry the King Lawler. 15's an interesting number because that's probably the age of the girl that he was accused of raping back in 93. Maybe she could make a cameo now. Her name could be like Legal Lolita or something. And, of course, Stacey Carter would be great to see back and have that whole thing go down. Anyway, coming in second place, 27% for Kane. Wouldn't that be a great This Is Your Life, Rodney? They could get all the different storylines from the multiverse that he's had, all the different twists and turns.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it would be. Of course, Paul Bear would come back, and Katie Vick would come up somehow.
He just shows up, and all the different tag partners he had, and all the face turns and everything else.
I think he's won the tag belts with more different partners than anybody. I think maybe Billy Gunn would have been second, but what a ridiculous list for Kane. Like, Big Show, the Hurricane, whatever. X-Pac, yes. Undertaker. Let's move on to number one. Who do you want to see the next This Is Your Life segment be on? Number one, with the most votes, 45%, went to Vince McMahon.
Wow.
That's the polls that were on WrestlingRoundtable.com. We have two new polls going on right now. Number one, what does Kane's new mask most resemble? And will Brock Lesnar quit MMA if he loses to Alistair Overeem? Overeem said that he'd send Brock back to WWE. And a lot of people seem to question his dedication still again. So those are the polls right now. You can vote on WrestlingRoundtable.com. And before we move on to you, the callers, I see you're on hold right now, so we'll get to you in a moment. But I got a question for you first, Rodney. We just had the best and worst Swerves talk on our YouTube show, and we're going to talk a little bit about that some more coming up. But as always, because we ask the people to, this is the idea. We want to hear your opinion, too. People are leaving comments about an angle that happened in 1992, and I don't know where it exactly fits. Let's see what you think. People brought up the whole Ric Flair, and I guess Kurt Hennig, 1992 angle where they were trying to really just get involved in the title match at SummerSlam with Macho Man and Ultimate Warrior. As you remember, Ric Flair was coming out and saying that one of you two has made a deal with me, and essentially starting mistrust between them and who's going to turn. And the swerve really was, there was no swerve.
Right. Which was pretty good because I don't know how that would translate these days, but for someone on the outside of a title picture, why not start some shit between two guys I don't like?
That's the thing, though, because I know when we were kids watching it at the time, a lot of kids were making up their minds on who it was going to be. I don't know about you, but I saw right through it immediately. Like, neither one. Ric Flair's just causing shit just to stir it up. So where do you think that would fall? Is it one of the best or one of the worst?
Well, do you remember the beginning of SummerSlam 92, Eric?
Roddy Piper and bagpipes.
No, I mean the intro. That was like intermission or something.
Okay.
They showed a lot of the townsmen and everything over there in England, and they had a little girl say, I think Mr. Classic's going to be in the Ultimate Warrior's corner today. I think just for that alone, it was great. Just for those quotes. I remember not going in there thinking that he was going to be with any specific one, because even back then, probably one out of like 4 swerves completely threw me off guard. I wouldn't call it the worst, because it wasn't. I wouldn't call it one of the best. It was good, but not one of the best. I wouldn't say it was bad either. It was a good swerve. It was a different kind of swerve, I think. It was like a swerve that didn't pull the trigger all the way, I would feel like. It was more of a manipulation than a swerve.
Right. And I liked it for that. So it had been brought up a few times on that video, so I thought I'd run it past you. So thanks for joining us for the MMA talk. We're going to move on to wrestling after getting some calls. Thank you to Amira for joining us tonight. And up first, we're going to go to Anthony in the Bronx. Hey, yo, what's up?
What's going on? I heard how y'all was talking about, like, the swerves and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think the dumbest swerve they ever did was the Lex Luger and Tatanka thing from, like, SummerSlam 94. Because everybody was like, oh, Lex Luger's joining the $1 Million Man. But the whole time it was Tatanka. And I don't know if you knew back then, but, like, I think most people saw right through that dumb, stupid thing. And, like, as far as, like, the whole Kane thing from last night on Raw, I saw, like, a lot of stuff on Facebook where people were saying, like, that's not really Kane and all that. Like, who else would it be, The Undertaker? And, like, what was the whole point of bringing back Kane with the mask when we already saw his ugly face in the first place? I guess, I don't know, I think Vince is, like, trying to reinvent him or something.
A lot of the cynical people seem to think that they're doing this because Mysterio and Sin Cara are out right now, and they had it dead set. They wanted to break that indoor mask-wearing record for the crowd of the Guinness Book of World Records, and now Kane has 2 masks on top of that. And besides, Kane shit stopped making sense a long time ago before he even lost the mask, and it just got worse after he lost it.
Yeah, because they wanted to give him personality.
Yeah, whatever. As if he didn't have fucking personality when he was living in a basement for 20 years after being set on fire. So, Rodney, Anthony brought up the Tatanka heel turn and the swerve, I guess, and I wasn't too into it. I guess I just didn't want to boo Tatanka. What'd you think of Luger and Tatanka?
I didn't see it coming. It wasn't one of the storylines I was really coming into, because I was more interested in the Bret Owen match and seeing how they're going to work the Undertaker angle and the rematch with Razor and Diesel. But, I mean, that's something I didn't see coming. Is it one of the worst? I guess for Tatanka's career, yes, because after that, no one even really cared. It really went nowhere. There's no big one-on-one pay-per-view match as a blow-off. It just didn't really go anywhere after that. I mean, it was great for all of 5 minutes. People were booing. After Tatanka sell out. And then what? And then he pretty much became an equal to Nikolai Volkov in the $1 Million Corporation. So in the long run, I thought it was the bad choice to turn Tatanka heel, because he was a pretty heavy fan favorite, and it was just the wrong time to do it.
You know where it should have gone?
Where?
Ted DiBiase should have given him money to open his own casino.
Yeah.
And then he could turn face again when he finds out that DiBiase, the white man, was stealing all the money again.
See that? He should have done it.
Ramon in Chicago, you're up.
I'm actually surprised that you didn't mention it for Swerves. What about
Rikishi? I know.
Running over Stone Cold.
Yeah, I don't know how that slipped our minds. I really have no excuse. I apologize.
You know, it was another swerve that I thought was actually really good.
No, what is it?
The forming of the 2-man power trip.
I don't know if that's so much a swerve as a heel turn. It was more stupid than a swerve. Like, how obvious could it be that, and I guess this is an appropriate time to bring you on, Will Brooks. Hey, Will.
Yo.
And I know you always love hating on Triple H, and since we're talking about the 2-man power trip, okay, so Austin is out for a year for neck surgery. The storyline explanation is the real stupid swerve involved in this talk, which is Rikishi ending up being the driver that Triple H paid off. So Austin comes back a year later. At Survivor Series, he tries killing Triple H in his car by dropping him off a fucking crane. And then this leads up to a couple months later at the No Way Out 3 Stages of Hell match. Now, of course, Austin is going in to challenge The Rock for the title the next month at WrestleMania, which means Triple H just has to get the win over him. And he does, with a pretty lame finish to an awesome match, I have to say. But right afterwards, they become friends. We just saw this in TNA where Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett, who have no reason to be teaming together after what they've been through, are all of a sudden in the same faction. And Triple H just seemed to be so obviously, to me anyway, as a viewer, sticking his nose in on a situation that he shouldn't have been involved in. And before the quad tear, apparently it was supposed to lead up to them eventually splitting up and having a series of matches for the title or some shit, which I'm not too upset that I missed out on that. But so here's your chance. You want to rip on Triple H some more for the two-man power trip?
Oh, please, where do I begin? First off, it doesn't make sense to me to turn Stone Cold heel when, first off, no one wants to boo him. We all still loved him. He still was the man. Second of all, he got popular by being a bad guy, so to speak. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Doing run-ins and kicking everyone's ass and breaking rules and beating up the balls, basically doing a bad guy stuff, but he got incredibly over and popular because of it. So how the hell do you make a bad guy who's already over as a good guy, how do you make him bad? He's already doing all the shit heels do. And not to mention the fact, again, like you said, it made no sense storyline-wise. And, again, like I said, nobody wanted to boo Stone Cold. We loved him. It made no sense. And, again, if it was leading to a Triple H, Stone Cold, or whatever hell it was leading to, I think they didn't need to make them both a tag team to make it like an interesting storyline for them to fight. Like you said, Triple H was really badass at the time. In 2000, he was the shit. I hate saying it. I really don't like saying it, but he was really good. A match with him and Stone Cold really didn't need a whole stupid storyline or like some elaborate storyline. You could have pretty much done something else, and it still would have been interesting to watch.
Abe in Augusta, Georgia, you're on.
Well, I'm sorry you lost the battle, Wills. I'm sorry for that. That's messed up. But I do want to mention y'all discussed the Mr. Perfect in '92. There was the SummerSlam Swerve.
Mm-hmm.
What about the Swerve later on that same year? Was it 2 months later before the Survivor Series? The Warrior got fired for. What was it? On steroids or something? And then I put Mr. Perfect back in, and then it was that whole, what was it, Superstars or something, where he turned on Heenan and said, "You're never going to turn, the Ric Flair made you." Then he came around and poured water on Heenan's head. Instead of forget this, I'm doing it like stats for Survivor Series. And the commentary of the Survivor Series where Heenan from Mr. Perfect's match is insane. He rushed him Perfect the whole match. That was funny. And it was all Savage was like, I don't like you. I don't trust you, but I need you. And Perfect was like, fake kind of was tweening, but he said, yeah, I'll do it. That was kind of cool.
That was not a swerve. That was a face turn, actually, on Primetime Wrestling. See, swerve is, I tried distinguishing it at the beginning of the Best and Worst Swerves videos so people don't make that mistake. It's when there's a situation where people are set up. It's not like they went into Primetime Wrestling that night with a plan that it was Macho Man and Mr. Perfect and they were secretly working together. It was really, over the course of the show, Macho Man convincing and goading Mr. Perfect into considering being his tag partner, and then what Ric Flair and Razor Ramon and Bobby Heenan said just egged them on in the wrong direction. So I think that's the distinction we want to make there. So let's move on to Coriander Ake. You recently watched some Ring of Honor on their website, and let's hear about that.
Match number 1, Shiloh Jones versus Tommaso Ciampa. And this was a very brutal match to watch. Tommaso just went after Shiloh's
brutal
head.
In what sense? That could mean a couple different things.
Brutal as in Tommaso would not let up on this poor kid's head. I mean, just on him and on him. He threw Shiloh Jones into the turnbuckle, threw some very hard kicks right into his head, kept hitting him in the head. Shiloh tried getting a second wind right before the end of this match and was almost killed with a lariat. He was decimated. Shiloh, he seems like a very nice wrestler. I don't think he's cut out for Ring of Honor just yet. I think he needs a lot more training. This was followed up with a segment after Tommaso won involving Kevin Steen. I think it's very interesting. You can see which people have been Ring of Honor veterans and which people definitely were brought in by Sinclair, because the people they have hired in as Steen's lawyers, they seem so very skittish. I don't think they understand Kevin Steen at all. This was a fun segment to watch, and I do like how Jacobs and Cornette and Carino kept taking turns holding each other back from annihilating Steen. But you can definitely see that there were a lot of people in that ring that Sinclair brought in. These newer people that they're bringing in, I just don't think they're cut out for Ring of Honor, really. like some of the new wrestlers like Shiloh Jones.
Wait a minute, let me stop you right there, because you're saying Sinclair brought in as if Sinclair, the network, or anybody from it is laying down the law and bringing in these people. It's not. Jim Cornette, Delirious, those are still the people in charge. That's really where it's coming from. Sinclair's funding it because they own it, but I just wanted to make that distinction.
Okay, but some of the newer wrestlers they're bringing in, though, they just don't really fit the Ring of Honor style. I wish that they would bring in the Bravado Brothers more, bring in Andy Ridge. I'd like to see those guys more often.
Well, how do you know the Ring of Honor style just isn't changing?
It could be. And a little more traditional, I guess. I liked the main event. The main event was the Young Bucks versus Future Shock. And I really like where the Young Bucks are going. I love their whole thing where they only shake hands with each other. I think that's just brilliant. This was a very good match, and the Young Bucks have gotten a lot stronger. I'm not going to be surprised at all if they get the tag titles next year, because they are really on top of their game.
Well, they got to sign first, and I don't know what the holdup is with signing the Young Bucks. I don't know what the situation there is. I was under the impression that they would be signed rather soon, but I don't know. I guess there's just some formalities to work out there, but I'm pretty sure they'll be official sooner rather than later, and they should be.
Absolutely. They've been getting so much better. I don't know where this fire came from, but, man, you can see that TNA screwed up by letting them walk. But this was a great match. I encourage people to go to the website and watch it. Young Bucks beat Future Shock, and this is just a really great match.
Now, next time we're going to be on the air, Corey, are you going to be telling us about AAW?
Absolutely, because this Saturday, AAW is having their annual Christmas event, and they already announced that Colt Cabana is going to be wrestling Shane Hollister, and that's going to be fun. Their main event is Silas Young in a Fans Bring the Weapons match. I'm very much excited for this. He's going to be going up against Ryan Boz, and I do believe the AAW Heavyweight Championship is going to be on the line. I do know, too, that Sami Callihan is going to be there.
We're going to move on to Raw now, and before we do, we have a new number on the line, 518 number. You're on.
Hi, this is Jay from South Carolina.
Hey, Jay from South Carolina. You're on the roundtable, so what do you have to say?
I just was at the Ring of Honor show, Southern Defiance at Spartanburg.
I'd love to hear how that turned out. That was their first show in that town.
Yeah, I think the attendance looked like to be maybe around 350, 400. I wish there was more people there, but it was good. The Briscoes, Roderick Strong, and Eddie Edwards, and the World's Greatest Tag Team, they all had an autograph signing beforehand, which was good. And they did a 10-bell salute for Bison Smith, which was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
But the first match, Mike Bennett defeated Adam Cole with his...
well, this move finally has a name, thankfully. Side Effect when Matt Hardy did it, which is, of course, the sit-down Uranagi suplex. But Mike Bennett calls it the, what does he call it? Box office smash or some shit like that.
Yeah. The Bavaros, they defeated Los Bandangos. I think if I remember right, they're... Yeah, weren't they trained by Team 3D, I think? Something like that.
I believe they are, and Los Pendejos in Spanish means the assholes, for those who don't know.
The Bavaros won, and they look really good. I really enjoy these guys. They look great, bulked up, and I like their ring tire, and they're just awesome. I think they're doing really good.
You got to see them at the proper time. They're going to be headed to Pro Wrestling Noah in January.
Oh, really? That's cool. I thought it was funny because the crowd really got on Harlem because calling him Justin Bieber, which is hilarious. Lethal defeated T.J. Perkins in the Proving Ground match, which is really good. Both of these guys, I really like both these guys a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Young Bucks defeated the All Night Express, and they really worked on Titus's leg, and I think he is actually hurt right now too.
Legit, yes.
Because he missed a couple indie shows.
Mm-hmm.
The Briscoe brothers defeated Coleman and Alexander. The Briscoes are huge in South Carolina. They were like, people were going nuts for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those are the best I saw, Coleman and Alexander too. They look really good, better than they have been on TV anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure they're much better spotlighted, and I know that a lot of that was taped for TV. I don't know what. I know some's, I believe, planned for DVD and some's for TV. I'm not sure which lands where, but I'm sure in that sort of environment, Coleman and Cedric Alexander shined a lot better than they would have on like a TV squash or some shit, because they're both pretty good.
Yeah, they are. The world's greatest tag team beat Elgin and Roderick Strong when Sheldon did the leapfrog to the top rope and German suplex on Elgin, which surprised me. I thought Elgin and Strong would win this and get a future title shot, but it didn't happen. Was
this your first ROH show?
No, I was at the Big Bang, and I was at Tag Wars 2010, and I think both of those events, the older events, I think they might have had maybe better matches on it, but overall, I think this was the strongest, the card. I think it had a lot of new matchups that we haven't seen on TV or any other shows, and a lot of tag team matches, which I really enjoyed, but it was really good.
Great. Thanks a lot for the report, Jay, and we're going to move on to Raw right now. And someone, I believe, who would be appropriate to bring on for this, I assume you watched it, but let's find out. Royce in Pomona, California, you're on.
Yes, I did watch Raw, and for the most part, it was kind of crappy. I mean, there was a few bright spots. Four-way was pretty good. Cena kind of trolling the fans about The Rock coming out to accept the award was pretty funny. Danielson and Punk losing on the same night was really great. I know this is like the 1,000th time we've seen this since in like 10 years, but the Kane return I thought was pretty well done. Even though that kind of heel turn doesn't make sense, I hope they explain it. I doubt they will, but I hope they'll explain it next week. But like it was just like it didn't need to be 3 hours, and like a lot of the awards didn't make sense.
They didn't even bother this year. There was no match of the year. There was no tag team. Like, I mean, the more serious ones.
Yeah, because he wanted to promote Twitter. But, I kind of want to talk about the Swerve thing a little bit. I remember you kind of touched upon it on the episode, and I think I ragged on it when it happened, but the whole Kevin Nash texting situation just really bothered me. Like, that Swerve, it reeked of, I think I said it before, but it reeked of just WCW era Russo, just like, who texted Kevin Nash? Was it Stephanie? Was it Johnny Ace? Was it Vince himself? No, it was...
You say that as if there's a distinction between WWF, WCW, or TNA Russo. It's all the same shit to me.
No, WWF, at least the time he was there, he had a few hits. WCW, there was really nothing there except pushing new guys. But
he put the title on Bret Hart when no one else did, motherfucker. But
well, he put on the Vanilla Mitch. It's him and Benoit. But besides that, but to my case, it's like it didn't make sense. It's like, why would Nash text himself to attack Punk? Why didn't he just go out and attack Punk? Why do you have to text himself? And how do you text yourself? Like, how does that work? They never like. It doesn't make technological sense. I know it's too much to ask for from WWE, but it makes sense.
It doesn't even make technological sense. I love that, especially for a company that's so hung up on Twitter. Will Brooks, this was a 3-hour show. I love the South Park parody of Raw they did, or wrestling, I should say. The South Park parody of wrestling they did, I believe, this year, where the best wrestler is the best talker, and it's all just talking. It really seems like that's almost fulfilled. I really, and again, I'm not going to go so far as to say that like the 4 million people that watch Raw every week or whatever are idiots or anything like that. I just don't understand how they can enjoy this show. From the opening segment all the way through the end, like the first hour and a half had like a minute's worth of wrestling or something, and this is the most amazing part to me. People generally were saying that Raw was bad. I mean, there was a few spots that, we liked Road Dogg or Kane came back or whatever. But it seems like the highlight of Raw this past week for most people was the 4-way with Daniel Bryan and whoever, right? Oh, wow, a wrestling match. Imagine that. I just don't get how people can stick through this week after week. And funny enough, the rating just came out before we went on the air. They did a 2.84 overall, which is just barely over 4 million people. And again, as has been the trend, if they want to trend on Twitter every second, how about this trend? For, I think, months on end at this point, if not weeks, Raw viewership drops throughout the night. People tune in to Raw because they want to see what's going on with their favorite people or whatever. and then they see what's lined up, and they're like, fuck this, I'll watch football. I've said it on the show before, and that happened again this week. And I just don't really get it. From what you've seen of Raw, what are your thoughts on just that whole overall thing? Like, the Slammys thing just took up way too much time, don't you think?
Someone said recently, and I totally couldn't agree more with it, it used to be a wrestling show that was on TV. Now it's a TV show that happens to have wrestling on it.
Mm-hmm.
Therein lies the problem right there. When you don't make wrestling the focal point, fans like us, we're going to hate it. I watch it every week because I do think it has potential and it could change, but it's not getting there fast enough. As far as the Slammers go, I actually kind of look forward to the Slammers a little bit. I mean, I know it's stupid, but it's something different once a year. Okay, cool. Maybe I'm still holding on to the days when Todd Pettengill used to host it and do the song, but this year was way too overdone, just like everything nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, a rap battle that features JR and Michael Cole. Good thing I didn't watch it live because I probably would have changed the channel like right there.
It's getting to the point now where my enjoyment is like reverse enjoyment because I enjoyed how bad it was and that this is what they spend their time on. Their precious television time goes to this. I loved it, firstly, because Michael Cole, it's as if Vince McMahon died and his spirit possessed Michael Cole's body. Like, Vince McMahon doesn't even need to be on TV at all because he really is already. His name is just Michael Cole now. He's even starting to look like him a little bit, I think. But he couldn't be more of just a vessel or puppet for Vince McMahon. Every line he says is Vince McMahon. He's even dancing like Vince would. In fact, if that song had been playing for like 10 minutes and he was just doing that dance, I would have thought it was the greatest thing. But I love it because clearly from watching it, at least to me, just the impression I got, they set Jim Ross out there with nothing. Like, they told him nothing that was going to happen. They didn't give him any sort of prep, and it showed. And just the fact that they do this shit still, it cracks me up in probably the wrong way. But then they bring out Road Dogg, who recently came back as a road agent, I believe. This is really going to lead into our talk that we're going to tape on Saturday when it comes to charisma versus in-ring skill. But I find it amazing that people are just gushing about their memories of Road Dogg. Like, I used to love the Outlaws. To me, they were just like two Andersons put together, just a catchphrase and nothing more. And I don't dislike Road Dogg. I think he's an okay wrestler and nothing more. But this is a guy who wrestled in a T-shirt his whole career and had like no classic matches, really. Yet, with just a couple chords and a catchphrase, everyone who, well, half the arena that actually watched back then, the other half obviously didn't know. But the people who remembered are like, yay, Road Dogg, because we remember a catchphrase or whatever. Whatever, he could still talk.
First off, your whole obsession with wanting to see Road Dogg's nipples still astounds me. But anyway, the whole thing with the New Age Outlaws is what made them so cool was they revitalized the tag division. They made tag teams cool again. And they did it, yes, with the catchphrase. But also, the matches weren't bad. Yeah, they had no classics. But they did have bad matches. And, like, Road Dogg, I mean, yeah, he's not like a top 10 worker, but he wasn't bad. He did very well for what he had. He's not very athletic, but he did very well for what he was possessed. They got Badass Gun was a good athlete. He was a good wrestler. Not good enough to get a huge solo push, but he was good enough to do cool stuff. New Age Outlaws revitalized the tag division. Without them,
I totally disagree with that. I think that was the TLC guys who did that.
Yeah, but they didn't get the opportunity. So the New Age Outlaws made tag teams cool again, though. The Hardys, Edge and Christian, the Acolytes, the Dudley Boys. Well, the Dudley Boys were kind of over already with the ECW, but those guys wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to shine if it wasn't for the New Age Outlaws.
I don't think so. I think the Outlaws were at their height in '98, but really as part of the faction, the larger DX group, and this TLC stuff really didn't take off till a couple of years later.
They were getting over way before they were in DX. They were getting over before that.
Oh, they were. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that I don't think them in and of themselves brought the focus back to the tag division itself.
I have to disagree with you on that one, man. I think they were the reason why it got cool again. I'm not saying all the TLC matches and the Acolytes and all the cool tag teams that came after that didn't take it to another level. They totally did. But without the Acolytes opening that door and showing how tag teams are cool and how entertaining they can be, those guys would have never gotten over like they did.
Jamal Reynolds in California, you're on.
Tune in next week for Young and Restless on Raw. That's what it sounds like when you guys are describing Raw to me right now. And
that's very cute. I like the pun.
Yeah, my brother and I, we were looking at Kane with his new mask and everything, a new attire. And, yeah, it is kind of a letdown, and I can't put my finger on it, but my brother says that he looks like he's wearing Michael Myers' mask or something.
Well, you can vote on our poll on WrestlingRoundtable.com and see what it resembles the most. There's a few choices for you up there. Abe in Augusta, Georgia, you're back on. You want to talk about Raw?
It kind of goes into Raw. I don't know that you said or not, but you said if you're going to do the talking era, like, you know how they said the Attitude Era, then you had the Brock era? We're in the promo era now where you're going to do more promos than the wrestling, which has been going on for 15 years, am I correct?
Right, because the Attitude Era was known for the opening 20-minute talking segment, too.
Yeah, and the problem is now, this is my personal opinion, in order that people talk, you need good talkers. If you want to have talking on the show, I don't like it being 90% of the show, but if you're going to have it, you need guys who can at least talk well for 90 minutes instead of guys who are not good talkers.
Give Road Dogg the mic for 20 minutes instead of a minute and 11 seconds.
I'd rather have me on the microphone Triple H. I'm sorry. I'd rather have me on the microphone for 5 minutes to have Triple H be on it for 20 minutes.
Kane has been brought up. I'm sorry that I expect some things to make sense. I know I shouldn't look for logic in WWE all the time, especially when it comes to Kane, but I just don't get. And when I bring this up, people say, well, Mark Henry ran away, as if that can't be fucking changed. Like he wasn't told to duck out at a specific point before they went out on camera. Anyway, so Kane comes back, and instead of going after Mark Henry, the guy who took him out, who has a belt, by the way, he goes after the guy without a belt for no real reason. I'm not even going to bring up the fact that he's a heel, presumably, and people want to cheer him, obviously based on the excitement that his entrance got. I just really didn't understand the whole thing. And I'm not even going to dwell on the fact that it's been done a million fucking times in the past 13 years, so it didn't really affect me in the same way. It's just more the same old shit to me, and it's just going to be more like that when Jericho comes back in January, and then Undertaker, and Triple H, and blah, 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 whatever. At least with The Rock, he's wrestling somebody new coming up at WrestleMania, and I'm sure Jericho will be wrestling Punk or some shit like that. So at least they'll be doing something different, but again, it's just the same old people. At least Shawn Michaels and Batista have had the decency to stay away so far. But Kane, I just didn't really get it. I didn't understand the whole segment, and I know what the real reason probably is. Well, John Cena doesn't have a match on Sunday. Like, it's a fucking written rule that Cena has to wrestle every single pay-per-view. I know he's the top guy, and he's the big name, but I just don't see why it has to be like, he must have a match. And especially against Kane. Why? Just because they've never wrestled before? Look, I'm sure it's going to be a fine match, but this is the reason you put this nonsensical shit together, just because they've never wrestled before and Cena needs something to do for a little bit. Why not just have Kane come back at the fucking pay-per-view that people pay for and pay to have cool moments after the Mark Henry Big Show chair match or some shit? I just didn't understand the whole thing. I mean, the mask underneath the outer mask looked okay. He looked a lot like Undertaker with his wig and beer stubble, but whatever. I was over Kane comebacks in 2000. So what did you think of that whole thing, Will Brooks?
I hear what you're saying, Eric. It didn't bother me too much because if you're going to bring back Kane, especially after the promos, you got to make an impact. And him chokeslamming John Cena to end Raw, that's making an impact. But this is the problem with that Kane character is that they always need to reinvent. Every couple of years, they need to do something big to make it seem like, oh, yeah, remember, people, he's evil. He's very evil. Look, see what he's doing now. He's evil. And every couple of years, he has to do something horrible to get over again because it seems like people are starting to get dull on him. And he has their face turned. All of a sudden, now he has to do something evil to become a heel again. Overall, I mean, like, it didn't bother me. I mean, you could just come out on SmackDown or next week on Raw and say, Mark Henry unleashed the beast inside of me again and whatever the hell. Mm-hmm. But as far as the mask, I think the mask kind of sucks, actually. I wish they would go back to the old mask. Maybe I'm nostalgic like that, but his new mask, I really don't like it. I mean, it looks plastic to me. It looks stupid. Like, if you take a good hard punch, it's going to break. Then the mask on top of the mask, the Rocketeer mask, listen, I love The Rocketeer. In fact, I just saw it on Sci-Fi not too long ago, and I love that movie as a kid. But it does not belong in the wrestling world, just like the Stormtrooper helmet for the shock match. It did not belong in the wrestling world.
Royce, you are back on the air.
The Slammys, was it me or did it seem like sweating to the oldies? Hey, look, it's Foley and DiBiase and Lita and Road Dogg. And look, Triple H is back, and hey, it's Kane. You have all these guys who are on superstars who are a lot of times putting on some great matches, but you can't put.
Speaking of superstars, not to cut you off, but speaking of superstars, how many guys do they have on this roster? Like, not even counting developmental or anything like that. Just like relegated to superstars or NXT or that sort of shit. How many guys do they have, and yet they still don't get spots? Wasn't this whole brand split supposed to create all these new stars, especially on a 3-fucking-hour Raw?
Yeah, and these guys aren't, like, bad. They're, like, putting on some really good matches sometimes, like, a lot of times better than pay-per-view. Why are we spending all this time paying, like, whatever $1,000 to get Foley on for a night? And I like Foley, and I like all the old-timers, but that's what, like, the Hall of Fame's for. Like, you can't you put, like, Trent Beretta on? Like, give him a shot. Kid, the Usos, like, so many guys who I think could bring in money, not just good matches, but actual money to the company, but they're not doing it because we need to bring Lita. How about making AJ your new star? Why bring in the old lady?
Because creative has nothing for you. Just put the fucking U.S. title on Zack Ryder already and get it over with. Why are you making us wait? Jamal, you're back on.
Speaking of Slammy Awards, the Wrestling Roundtable discussion board, we're doing the whole Wrestling Roundtable discussion board awards again, like we did last year. It will be hosted by myself, Zach Fellows, Corey Underake, and Bill Treadway. And also, I would agree, they got us new stars.
All right. You can sign up for the message board at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Zach Fellows, as Jamal brought up, does recaps of SmackDown for the site. We thank him for that. And everyone else for your participation in the show. Will Brooks, we just recently uploaded the best and worst swerves and wanted to follow up on that a little bit because our fans really come through on a lot of these sort of videos. Doesn't seem like they give a fuck about anything else. I upload all that other stuff that I put work into. But the video chats, they at least like. And they started leaving some pretty interesting, good comments, their own opinions, and other ideas that we didn't cover, which is the idea. We don't get to cover all the ground we necessarily want to or can or anything like that, and that's good because we give you the chance to fill in the blanks that maybe we sometimes miss, and we want to hear what you think anyway. So they started listing some other ideas they had for best and worst swerves and wanted to see if you had any more you wanted to add.
I still believe the Kurt Hennig turning on the Four Horsemen was a bad swerve.
And you're still wrong.
I don't care that you guys think I'm wrong. I'm sticking to it, damn it. Rikishi as a driver at Survivor Series 99, that was a shitty swerve. It's one of the things that goes under, like, something they did and they couldn't explain it until the last second, so they figure, fuck it, Rikishi, you're over. Do it. It's like the Raw GM. Down in the GM, we still don't know who the fuck it was, and they just stopped talking about it, so we'll just never know, I guess. Maybe one day they'll just blame it on Laurinaitis. Who knows?
It's funny because I think Jim Neidhart, of all people, came up on both lists. Because first up, there was the post-Survivor Series banishment of the Hart Foundation from WWF, and Jim Neidhart was one of the last to leave. Owen, of course, didn't leave, but Jim Neidhart shows up on Raw, sucking up to DX, and then they just swerve him to throw him right back out and spray paint him with WCW. And man, could they possibly bury someone more on their way out? Not only does he look like a sellout because he's selling out his fucking family for the people that screwed him over, then he gets beat up because he's not even wanted anyway. He looks like a real fucking schmuck on the way out. But back in 1994, at the King of the Ring, this was an awesome setup because Jim Neidhart shows up unannounced. This was Bret Hart's surprise. He was in his corner in the title match against Intercontinental Champion Diesel, who had Shawn Michaels as his second, and Neidhart fended him off. Now, of course, Neidhart ran in after this good match and ended up getting Bret disqualified. Well, as we found out later in the night, it was all a setup because you may remember the New Foundation from 1992 when he teamed with the Rocket Owen Hart. Well, they reformed their team there because he attacked Razor Ramon in the finals, setting up Owen Hart to hit the flying elbow drop for a win, and Jim Neidhart turned on his old Hart Foundation partner Bret Hart, setting him up for Owen to get the title match, which ended up being at SummerSlam, of course. So the way things came together for that one ended up being real good.
I love that whole swerve by Neidhart. Especially, I thought Neidhart was so much better as a heel than he was face. His laugh just went way better when he was kicking someone's ass as opposed to making a comeback. Anytime like Neidhart did something cool as a heel, I was all on board for it. Especially like in '97 when he was part of the Hart Foundation.
Caligula Ravishing in our message board said that one of the worst swerves was when Samoa Joe was kidnapped by ninjas in TNA and then returned 4 weeks later, totally fine. I have to agree with him. That was a ridiculous segment.
Wasn't that the Green Lantern shit?
That was around the time when they had Kato. It was just confusing, and actually went nowhere. Random Minds said that one of the worst swerves was when Rikishi turned heel, and one of the best swerves was when R-Truth turned heel.
Well, what does that even mean? Like, R-Truth turned heel? Like, it was just a heel turn. What's the swerve here?
R-Truth turned against Morrison. I think that one of the worst swerves, and this really hurts me because I really respected her a lot, and you can find this match on several of WWE's older DVD sets. One of the worst swerves was when it was found out that the Fabulous Moolah was Spider Lady. I think that was sometime in the 80s. I don't remember the exact year, but...
About 1985, and a lot of people think they actually screwed Wendy Richter out of the title. That was the original WWF screw job.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. I feel that it didn't go anywhere, and it really should have gone to somebody else. I heard rumors when I was a little girl that they had somebody else playing Spider Lady before the unmasking, I believe one of Moolah's students. That would have been a great time to push somebody new, have the student come forward and say, I'm doing this for my mentor. I think that would have been a stronger swerve. To have it be Moolah just sort of weakens the entire story. One of the better swerves, and I don't know how many of our listeners are Ring of Honor fans, but one of the better swerves, I feel, was when Lacey left the Age of the Fall for Austin Aries. I actually remember where I was sitting when that happened, and that was just a what the fuck, holy shit kind of moment. We didn't know that was going to happen, and I feel this was an excellent swerve. When Batista turned against Evolution in 2005 before WrestleMania, I thought that was very well done.
That was just a face turn. Yet again, not a swerve, but if I haven't made the distinction enough, just go back and listen to what it was. If you want to bring up Stephanie joining up with Triple H in late 99, the Hebners being paid off by DiBiase to screw Hogan out of the belt in 88, Eric Bischoff being revealed as being behind NWO Sting, or Sting's crappy heel turn in WCW 99 with the original Hummer angle. You can leave a comment on YouTube or go to the message board, because that is all for Wrestling Roundtable Radio for the night. Next time, we're going to talk about Strikeforce, Melendez versus Masvidal, AAW, TLC 2011, Final Battle 2011, and more. So for the panel of Will Brooks, Rodney LeConte, Amira Rahim, Coriander Ake, and thank you to all the callers. Join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com. I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. Share, rate, comment, and subscribe.